Hello, this is Terry from Fabric Junction in Sturgis, South Dakota. Today I'm going to show you how to bind your quilt project. This is a technique I've done for years and years because I didn't have the time to do any of the hand work that was associated with binding, so I did it all on the machine. What I have with me today is a piece that was left over from another project, and it has the insulation in it, so I decided I'm going to just convert it into a nice pot holder with a simple binding. So the first thing I did is I cut my strips, and I cut strips based on the project, so I'll cut anything from a 2.5 or 2 3/4 to a 3-inch strip. I cut my strips, and then I need to sew them together, and to do that we need to go right sides together, but we have to make an angle. And I discovered a little tool while I was out traveling called the folded corner clipper that gives me that seam without having to draw a pencil line from point to point. So what I do is, once I have my pieces together, I place the folded corner clipper, I line it up on the first point and the last point, and then I trim. Now I know it creates a bias, but since I'm going straight to the machine, I'm not as concerned about stretching. As you see, I slip a pin. Now I know that I am going to sew from corner to corner, and I don't have to come back and trim it. I can see exactly where I'm going to sew. I could do several in a row and sew. So this is how I attach my strips. Once I have my strips sewn together, I go to the machine. My machine is iron this time, excuse me, and I press. And I do like to press these seams open because of the way we do our binding. We don't end up with as much bulk. So press your strip in half lengthwise. And that should give me plenty to work with. Now we're ready to sew. We go to the back side of our project, create a nice tail, start a ways away from the corner. You don't want to start right in the corner. Create a nice tail. I use a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And you stitch to where, sometimes I use a pin to tell myself where to stop. You could mark it if you want, but stop about a 1/4 inch from the end. With your needle down, turn and sew off the edge. You can trim your thread, pull it away if you want. Now the next step is this. I turn it towards my body. My tail is to my right. I fold it, what I go north, and you create this first angle. That's the angle we're looking for. Now this is the part that's very important. When you bring it back towards your body, when you come back south, make sure you're lined up. This fold is lined up exactly with that edge, and this raw edge is lined up. The neater that you can get those two sections, the easier and the nicer your turn will be. So once you have that in place, go ahead, sew to the next corner. We're going to do the same thing. Like I said, I kind of eyeball it. If you would like to measure, you sure can. If you're using a wider seam allowance, that's okay too. Just make sure that your seam allowance is consistent. And once again, I sew off to the edge. I have this looking towards me, and that's the reason I say my tail is to my right. And then I go north because it's going away from my body. And then I bring it back south. And then I double check, and as you can see, I'm not lined up very nice, so I have to make sure that I am lined up, the fold right on that edge, the raw edge is over here. Okay, I have all four corners. Now we need to finish. And what I do to finish is, on this particular one, I know I have a 2 3/4 inch strip. So I just take my ruler and I lay it down so that I can read 2 3/4. So I lay my piece, I fold this back. Now the key here is not to have more than you need. It's okay to be a hair less, and sometimes I do that. But I fold it back and I know that's what I want. So once I have it folded back, everything looks nice. I'm at 3 3/4 on this particular one. I pick this up and I cut it. Now with this part, sometimes I have such a habit of what I do that it's hard for me to always show you, but in essence that's what I do. I'm going to turn this around so you can see it from your perspective. So you take your tail that's on your left hand, that is laid out this way, you just open it up so it lays nice and flat right in front of you. And a lot of times I like working with a little bit longer tail, but this one happens to be a fairly small project, so you just work with what you have. This one here then, it's your one on your right hand side. We open it up and then we turn it towards your body, so it'll have a little turn as we match our right sides. Once I have the right sides together, and I know I'm going to sew from that angle to this angle, that I don't want to go here to here because nothing will happen. So this corner here where they're matched, I'm going to sew from here to here. To double check that I did get mine turned right, I put a pin in the direction I'm going to sew. So then when I open it up, if this looks like a continuous line, I know I had matched it correctly. So once I have it matched, I go to the machine, go to my sewing machine and lay it out. And like I said, a lot of times I like to have a little more tail to work with. And I want to stay lined up. And I when I line it up, as you can see with the shorter tail, it takes a little more time to line it up. I make sure I'm lined up here and here on these two sides. I'm not as concerned quite yet about the bottom end because I need to get a couple stitches and secure it. Then I can move this out of the road, find my corner, stick a pin, that's where I'm headed, is right there, and go. If I have a bigger tail, I use my folded corner clipper to trim that because then I have more to work with. But on this little project I don't have as much. Before I cut that, I double check. Is it going to lay where I want it? And the answer is yes. So then I take, and now I can take my corner, and this will give me just a nice seam end. And I cut, and I do a finger press on this particular one. Just kind of finger press it open, fold, lay it, oh, it's laying nice, and then I stitch. Now the last step is, now we'll go back to the front, and you take this and you fold it forward. So we're going to top stitch it from the front side, and I fold over just enough, you can see with the stitching how easier on the black, to fold it over so that it's just barely over that stitching. Go to your sewing machine again and stitch close to the edge. Doesn't have to be clear in. You don't want this to start to roll up on you after you have sewn it down. So you want to stay fairly close to the edge. Now to do the corner, as you can see, I take my thumb and I force it up, and it just wants to pop up. And you can already see that nice miter on the back side. Well, to create that same on the front, I keep things lined up, and then I use my tweezer. With the tweezer, I can grab this corner and it'll give me the angle I want, and I can turn it over. When I turn it over, I match this little intersection right there. I hold it with my tweezer because my goal is to get the needle into that intersection. And once it's in there, I remove the tweezer, I line up the other side, and I continue to the next corner. And I'll take this off and show you what a nice corner then that you have once you have turned it, and from the back side. So the back side will have stitching, you'll want it to kind of match, and then you finish with the top. Thank you for watching our video. Do check out our folded corner flipper. We'll have additional videos in which we will be using that tool. Check out our website below. Thank you.